Well, hello, Missoula. I'm Adrian Beck from the Missoula Office of Emergency Management, and normally you see me this time of year in a gym as we're talking through kind of what we expect for flood season. But amid the COVID-19 pandemic, it's not wise for all of us to gather in one location. So today we're going to do something a little bit different, and we're going to try to give you your flood briefing and what you can expect this spring, and the resources that we're trying to make available to you virtually. So with that, we're going to go to the National Weather Service. Our trusty partners at the National Weather Service always give us a good outlook for the spring, as well as what they're anticipating for any kind of flood impacts.
Hi, this is Ray Nicholas with the National Weather Service here in Missoula, Montana. I'd like to talk to you today about the forecast for the Clark Fork River for possible flooding here this spring. So we'll just take a quick overview of the snowpack that's accumulated in the Clark Fork River Basin above Missoula. We'll take a look at last year's flooding on the Clark Fork River here in Missoula, and then finally look at the potential for flooding here on the Clark Fork River in Missoula this spring. So this year we've got 114% of the normal snow water equivalent up in the mountains and the Clark Fork River Basin. That's as of April 24th. Look a little more detail at that. What we're looking at here is a graph that shows on the y-axis the snow water equivalent in inches, and on the x-axis the months of the year as we go through time here. Now the accumulation that we're seeing, if you look at the black line, that would be this year's accumulated snowpack, and then this orange line would be last year's, and then that green line you see in there is what the normal would be. So you can see we're a little bit above the normal for this time of year, not a tremendous amount, but enough to give us problems here, and similar to last year. So as we look at the Clark Fork River and as it comes into Missoula, this is at the USGS River Gauge upstream in East Missoula. The Clark Fork River last year we had some warm weather. It got the river to move up and into that 7.5-foot flood stage towards the end of April. Stayed there for a while, and then we got some cool weather. The river came down and then finally peaked there at the middle of May, right around 9.13 feet. Now this year, we're looking at the Clark Fork River most likely to crest very similar to last year, maybe a little bit higher, about half a foot higher, looking at our most recent forecast, and that'll happen in the month of May or June. We could actually reach the flood stage of 7.5 feet by the first or second week of May if we continue to get some warmer temperatures. And less likely forecast would be actually to crest below the 9-foot level if we have a lot of cooler weather, less rainfall occurring in the spring months. And then another less likely forecast would be to actually go the other way and have it crest above that 10-foot level if we get really warm and get some big rains mixed in with that peak. So that's what we're expecting, and the impacts of that is as soon as we get up in that 7.5-foot level on the Clark Fork River, we'll see water start to move its way down into the Kerwall Drive and Upper Tower Street area. As it gets higher and higher above 7.5 feet, that'll put more and more water into that region of the Kerwall Drive and Tower Street areas, and we'll have about the same as we saw last year, about a foot, maybe a little bit more than that, of water in those areas. So that wraps up this briefing. If you'd like more information, get onto our website at the National Weather Service, and here's a link to that. And thank you, and we'll talk to you later.
Okay, so based on what we just heard from the National Weather Service, what we anticipate is an average to slightly above average flood season this year. So what does that mean for you? Obviously that means that if you've lived in the neighborhood of the Orchard Homes area, specifically down in the Tower and Kerwald area, that you're likely going to see water impacts around your home and to your property. So what does that mean? We still have snow in the mountains. Spring is still coming. Hopefully we'll get some nice warm weather, but not too quick and not too hot. But pay attention. You need to pay attention to what's happening day to day, but also pay attention to forecasts. There's all kinds of trusty websites out there. The National Weather Service does a phenomenal job of alerting the public and warning the public when we expect to see impacts, but also pay attention to those river gauges. As you know, last year, as we went into flood season, we had a new flood stage at around the 7.5 foot mark for the gauge above the Clark Fork above Missoula. That's when we start to see impacts, specifically in the tower open space and in the Kerwald area. So what that means is pay attention, make a plan, think about if you had to evacuate, or if you couldn't stay in your home because of the water, because there was a safety issue, because maybe you can't flush your toilet, your well is impacted by flood water, where are you going to go? So start thinking about those kinds of things now so that you're not trying to make those plans amid kind of the crisis of flooding. Think about how you're going to communicate with your family. It's critically important that when you are not able to be in your home, that your family knows where you're going to be and that they know how to get a hold of you. What are you going to take with you? How are you going to take care of your pets? Make sure that you have everything that you need so that you don't have to come back and forth to a potentially hazardous situation should you be evacuated from your home or should you not be able to stay in your home. So think about all these things ahead of time so that when the bad situation happens, you already have a plan. We talk about this all the time. Sign up for emergency alerts. You can sign up for emergency alerts from our office at smart911.com. That is how we're going to communicate with you. That's how we're going to tell you when things that may impact you are going to impact you. So it's critically important for you to sign up for those emergency alerts and to monitor social media and to look for information from trusted sources. Our office, the sheriff's office, we have great partners within our local media who always carry our messages. So again, it goes back to just pay attention. Right now, we're not thinking about flooding, so it's time to think about flood insurance. If you are a property owner down there, I encourage you to take a look at flood insurance. There is a 30-day waiting period before a policy becomes active, and so it's important for you to think about that now, because if you think about it when the water's lapping at your door, it's too late. Another thing when you're thinking about flood insurance is talk to the carriers that provide it. Make sure that if you are a property owner that has experienced groundwater in the past, that you don't fall into the assumption that your flood insurance is going to cover groundwater in the future. Typically, flood insurance is not designed to cover damage from groundwater. As we go into flood season, you'll see that our typical website will transition. Right now, of course, we have all kinds of information about COVID-19 and everything that's going on there. All indications are that will stay there. But you may have to dig down a little bit deeper to find some flood information. This panel here on the side is where you can kind of navigate from our website. One of the questions we get most often is sandbags. So if we look here, we'll provide you with all of the vendors that we know that are providing sand, bulk sand, or anybody, sometimes Home Depot will provide pre-filled sandbags. That information will be on our website as it becomes available. But also know that here in Missoula County, we will do what we have done in the past, and that there will be sand, bulk sand, and empty sandbags available at Fort Missoula. There's also flood insurance information on here that can be kind of your initial guide to how to seek that out should you be looking for that information. So all I can tell you is that planning is so critically important because you know all of the individual nuances of your life, what is going to make you comfortable. When you rely on us to make plans for you, sometimes we don't take into consideration all the things that are important to you. So we rely on our community partners that help us take care of folks when flooding occurs, whether that's through donations management, financial assistance, or help providing labor for sandbagging. But again, make a plan and communicate that with your family and seek out the resources that you need. All right, as we go into flood season, it's important to figure out where you're going to get reliable and good information. For those of you that have gone through flood seasons or any other emergency in Missoula County, this number will not be new to you. 258-INFO or 258-4636 is kind of our go-to information line for when something is going on. If you call that number today, you're going to get information about resources that are available for people impacted by COVID-19 or being able to speak to a public health nurse about questions about COVID-19. If the need arises, we will populate that line with information about flooding resources should that need arise. Also, our website is a great site where we will keep that up to date with any pertinent information for citizens experiencing flooding, as well as pointing you to resources. And finally, we just always encourage you to turn to local media. We have a great relationship with them, and they always carry our message well. Thanks.